Okay, we're gonna get started.
Really? Oh, you're kidding.
All right, if I could have your attention, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Obviously, I'm not Danny Halstead. I got called out of the bullpen because Danny and Tanya became grandparents a few hours ago. So anyway, you got me. So for the moment, we're really glad you're here. The whole idea today is kind of an informal get to know Wayne and his background and personal and ministry history. There will be opportunities to hear him share the vision that we have for 2024 and beyond, to allow you to have some questions later on, so just hold any questions till then. We're sorry for the ambient noise, but we had a choice of here or the pavilion. We're worried about the possibility of rain when we scheduled this on Friday, so I think a lot of that will probably die down in the next half hour as people finish their lunch. So anyway, the first beginning part of it, we're going to interview Wayne, and he's going to share a little bit about his family history and ministry history. So why don't you start by telling the people a little bit about your family, and then we'll get into the ministry.
Great. All right, can you guys hear okay in the back? We're going to project as well as we can. But yeah, a little background just on family. My wife and I both grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and that general area. And she was in one part of the city and I was in the other, but we grew up there, and I was thankful to be raised in a very strong Christian family. My dad is still a role model for me. He passed away a few years ago, but one of the godliest and best leaders I've ever known. And so grew up in the household there. My mom's still alive. She's 87, and she lives there in Memphis. And I told her when I moved from Houston up here, I'll be 3 hours closer. So best we could do. So she liked that. But anyway, Allie and I met while we were at the University of Memphis in undergraduate. We both went off to school our first year. She went to Stetson University in Florida, and I went to the University of Tennessee. She came back because her parents said it's too expensive. We want you to come back here. I came back because my dad said, I wasn't paying for you to have a year of vacation. So he kind of cut off the finances, and I had to figure out how to make it work on my own. So came back to Memphis and finished up. And then we met in the college ministry at First Evangelical Church. And one thing led to another. She's a few years younger than me, but I hung around college long enough, so it didn't matter. But I ended up doing an internship at First Evan there in Memphis for 3 years, and during that time, we got married. She was 21. She was in her senior year of college, and we got married on spring break. She did not want to go back to school when you got back from your honeymoon, but that's the way it worked for us. So that was 1991 that we got married, and not long after we got married, about not even a year after we got married, we headed off to Dallas Theological Seminary and went through the 4-year THM program in Dallas. Then took a small church in North Mississippi, and I'm not going to get too much into the ministry, I'll do that in a minute, but that's also in North Mississippi is where we adopted our first son, Spencer. Allie had actually had cancer as a child and a Wilms tumor, and because of that she was unable to have kids. So we went the first 8 years of our marriage without kids. Those are some really good times, looking back on it. But then we ended up adopting. We went through a failed adoption first and stateside, but through that process, we learned about the need that was in Russia. So when it came time, God provided us finances through a number of individuals, and we went to Krasnoyarsk, Siberia, and adopted Spencer. And then 2 years later, we had moved to a church in Austin, Texas, and we started praying, God, would you have us to adopt another child? And our small group, which was mostly made of 30-something-year-olds, took up a collection. We didn't know they were doing this, but the elder who was over the group had said, well, I'm getting this refund back. It was during George Bush's term when he gave that financial refund. He said, I'm going to give a refund, and I'm just going to give it to the Smiths for adoption if anybody wants to join me. And it turns out they raised $38,000. And so not only were we able to adopt one child, but we adopted 2 children. And that's where Finn and Juliana came into our family. Just a funny story there. So Juliana was 2 years old when we adopted her. And so Spencer would have been 5 or 6. And he comes to meet us at the airport. And so he's in the back of the car with Juliana. And he keeps trying to talk to her. And finally he goes, how come she won't talk to me? He's mad as he can be. She wouldn't talk to me. She doesn't understand a word you're saying, Spencer. So anyway, but that was our journey early on. And let's see what else. Then we moved from Austin up to the Seattle area and raised our kids up till early high school before God brought us back to Houston. Allie's parents have both passed away. She does have a sister in the Memphis area. I have my mom and both of my sisters kind of in the Memphis area. So in fact, next Sunday, after I preach, I will jump in a car and head there because we had a pre-scheduled family reunion there in the Memphis area. So I'll be heading out for that during that time. So that's the brief of the family history.
Okay, well, let me, how many were here the Sunday that all the kids were here? Raise your hand if you're here. Okay, so most of you, but not all of you. So, talk a little bit about what Juliana's like and Finn. I don't know if you know or not, but Finn has got some disabilities. Why don't you tell a little bit about that? And then the fact that you knew that going in. This was not like a surprise after the fact.
Right.
So, but that speaks a lot about their heart, that they were willing to not only adopt a child from Siberia, but adopt a child with special needs.
Well, so yeah, my 3 kids, Spencer is a business consultant, and he actually is based out of College Station. So he graduated as an Aggie and just stayed there. But he's a brilliant young man, graduated in 3 years, summa cum laude. He took the opposite path of me. I tried to stretch mine out over 6 years. He did his in 3. He said he was trying to balance me out. But he's working for a consulting group, Berkeley Research Group, and is also looking towards his MBA. So that's kind of his track. And he's a kid that at 25 is able to pay cash for a brand new car. So he's a saver. He's a hard worker. That's his personality. You'll meet him. And then Juliana is, let's just say she's the opposite of Spencer in some ways. She would a lot more rather have fun than study a book. It's just, that's just the way she operates. Learns everything by hands-on and doing things like that. So she did not care much for school. So she did a little bit of junior college, a little bit of a Bible college on a GAP program, but decided school, university wasn't a thing for her. But she did go get her medical assistant certification from Pima Medical Institute. And since then has been 2 years now as a medical assistant, and she works in the Woodlands area. It thrilled my heart yesterday to hear that she was looking for jobs up this direction. So his dad's kind of hoping she moves this direction, either Dallas, South Tyler, or locally. But that's her. And then Finn is our youngest. I do call him Stephen a lot because that's what I named him, but he likes to go by Finn. And so you may hear me do both. If he's near me when I say Stephen, he'll probably go, he wants to be called Finn. So Finn, when we actually went to Russia, you could mark boxes, and we marked the box that we would not be able to adopt a special needs child. And part of that was because we knew in ministry, financially, we didn't know what that would look like. Well, we get there, and we meet Stephen and realize he's 8 months old and can't even turn over. He's sick all the time, and there's obviously a lot of medical issues that they didn't know about and we didn't know about, and orphanage had not really told us about. And but we felt like if God's brought us there, they gave us an option. You don't have to adopt him. You don't have to take the one girl and go home. But we were like, God provided the finances and got us here. This is the boy that God wants us to have in our home. Once we got back, we found out he does have muscular dystrophy. But right now that's not heavily affecting him, but we never know what that might do down the road. He is also on the autistic spectrum. So he lives with us and probably will live with us. He's very high functioning autistic. As many of you know, he probably came up and introduced himself. We've worked hard on those social skills. And so he's doing well with that. But he'll be here with us, living with us for the foreseeable future. But he's the only kid in the house that cleans up after himself, so we're more than happy to have him stay.
Well, another piece of information on Juliana, she was a nationally ranked gymnast. Can you give a little more?
Yeah, you know, we got her in gymnastics. We were actually at a church event, or just at church Sunday, I think, and somebody goes, is she in gymnastics? And we're like, no. And they said, well, we can't get, she climbs on top of the placegate and walks like a bounce beam over the bar. And I'm first of all thinking, what are you letting my kid do that for? You know, a little control here. But so we did get her in gymnastics pretty early on, and so she was in gymnastics up through about age 15 or 16. Like a lot of girls like that, she ended up breaking an ankle and she also broke a knee. And so injuries caught up with her, but in the midst of that, she was ranked third in the state, came in third in the state 2 years running in the state of Washington. And then we moved down here, and she only did gymnastics about a year here because we were trying to scale back from 20 hours a week to something more manageable, and her injuries kind of caught up with her. But yeah, she's a great athlete in a lot of ways.
Okay, on the ministry side, why don't you kind of give the Tracy, you talked a little bit about that, but continue on up through the Northwest and how you got to Houston and how you got here.
How did I get here?
A lot of prayer.
A lot of prayer. So I started my ministry at First Evangelical Church, started as a part-time intern, and things worked out well, so they brought me on full-time. And that is my home church. It's the church where I was started in ministry. My parents were there. They ordained me. That's actually where I'm going on the Sunday after Thanksgiving. I'll be preaching there. You'll be having Dr. Timothy Warren, who is my preaching mentor from Dallas Seminary, will be here with you guys. So you won't want me back, but I'll come back. But anyway, so we started there in Memphis, but that was a very important time for me because I really felt like, I think John MacArthur used to drill into my head. He would say that you're not called into the ministry until the elders say you're called into the ministry. And so I thought it was very important that I would be sent out from the church to go into full-time ministry. And so that happened during that internship. So I went to Dallas Seminary, and it's a 4-year program there. My first ministry pastorate was I served in some various capacities while I was in Dallas, but ended up in North Mississippi in a small town called Hernando. They say Hernanda, but it's Hernando. And spent a year there as a pastor of that church, and as a new church startup. Left there, ended up in Austin, Texas, where we were for 7 years at Hill Country Bible Church. And while we were there, my role when I started was singles ministry and men's and women's ministries. To give you a little scope of that, we grew from about 2,200 to about 4,000 people while I was there. And the women's ministry was 400 people. So, you know, kind of large, and it was a very different environment, but loved my years there. Ended up as the pastor of spiritual formation, which is basic discipleship for the church, before we ended up transitioning out. And the main reason we left there, to be honest, we loved Austin and a lot of great things there, but just felt like God wanted me more in a lead, preaching and leadership role, and the senior pastor there affirmed that, and so they said, why don't you put your resume out, keep working here, but use part of your time to see where God may lead you next. And we expected to get back closer to Memphis, and instead we ended up north of Seattle. And my dad put it, he said, so is there any place in the continental U.S. you could have gone further from us? And probably not. In fact, when I say north of Seattle, people are like, Canada? Because that's pretty much what's up there. But we were in Snohomish, Washington. If any of you watch Home Fixer-Up shows, there's actually one of them of a couple some ladies that do it in Snohomish. So that's where we were. Beautiful, beautiful area up there. So the church there the founding pastor had been there 15 years, and in his words, I came here to plant a church. I don't know what to do with it now. So we did an intentional transition where he was a senior pastor. I came in as a teaching pastor. We served together for 9 months. Then he said, hey, it was actually scheduled to be a 2-year transition. He goes, look, he's ready and I'm ready. Let's do the transition. So we did, and then he stayed on staff under me for about another year before he retired. And those were great years. He's a phenomenal, godly man, and so it was just a blessing to have that relationship. But while we were there, God, again, blessed the ministry, and we were about 600 when I showed up, and we ended up going multi-site with 2 campuses up in the area. One is Lake Stevens, one in Snohomish. And you know, the amazing thing about the Snohomish campus is it was the one where they started at, and you had to know where the church was to find it. It was not on a main thoroughfare. You had to actually drive back up in kind of the hills, and then they had this 11-acre piece of property. But you know, every church growth person would say, no, that would have been a terrible place to plant a church. God had other plans, and it ended up being a perfect location for 3 different cities that could all drive there, small cities, but just saw a great ministry there. 7 years went by, and if Allie were here to tell you the story, she would probably give you a little different picture. She found the Northwest to be a very difficult place for her for 2 reasons. One is it rained all the time, and so she, as she said at one point, she said, all of my friends are on antidepressants, and I don't want to go that direction. And you're down there shaking your head about the Northwest. But and I found people either love that or they don't, you know. And for me, I was kind of like, man, there's mountains, there's water, there's fishing, there's hiking. I'm a pretty happy man. But at the same time, I began to feel, and it was very subjective in some ways, I know, but since God was saying, Wayne, I brought you here to get the church to this location, to get to the church this place, where they're at, I'm going to bring in somebody else to take it from here. I have another assignment for you. And so as we began to pray, we were just like, Lord, we're willing to stay here for the rest of our ministry lives. But if you'd see to move us before our kids get into high school, we'd appreciate that too. And so we didn't really go into a full search process, just put our resume out to the seminary and told them we might be looking. And next thing we know, we get calls from 2 churches in Houston. And so ended up at Bethel Church of Houston. Years ago, it was called Bethel Independent Presbyterian Church. And if you're familiar with the Houston area, it's in the Tanglewood area, kind of down near the Galleria area. And so went there in 2006, like you know. Yeah, look at that. 2006, and really with the goal, they said they'd gone through a church split, and so there were a lot of struggles there at the church, and they kind of lost all of their 30-year-old, 40-year-olds to the church split. And so they really wanted somebody to come in and say, how do we reach the younger generations here at the church, and how do we set ourselves up for success in the long term? So I was 8 years at the church, and I think we accomplished a lot of that. I can't say numerically we grew like we'd hoped, but we did make a lot of transitions of ministry style and a lot of other issues to set ourselves up, I think, well for the future. And then about 8 years into it, I kind of felt a little bit like I was always into church planting, so we had sent church planters out, and was in a church planting network there in Houston. And I just kind of felt like, okay, I think it's time for us to go plant church. And so we gave our resignation. I mean, there was a long resignation process. I gave my resignation once, and I didn't take it at Bethel. And so a year later, I did it again. And I guess they finally figured he's going to leave some point. Might as well take his resignation. But anyway, saying somewhat humorously, but good folks. Love the elders there still. But we launched out to plant a church in Montgomery County, north of Houston. And so that's what we've been doing the last year and a half. And we did get a couple of small groups going. But just as I looked at the reality of finances, we were like, it's not financially sustainable probably for another year and a half. And we were in a growth area, which was great because the community we started in had it was scheduled to have 4,400 homes. And at that point when we moved in, had 200 actually on the ground. By the time we're now leaving, there's about 400 on the ground. So I still think it's a right place for ministry, and I'm hoping that group that we formed will continue to do ministry in the community and continue to see growth. But because of that, we began to say, okay, God, where do you want us to go? And that's why I shared a little bit this morning. You know, that was a period of time I was like, God, you know, I expected, you know, we'd go out and plant church and things would just explode. God doesn't always do what you expect. And so we really went through a time, God, what do you want us to do at this point? Is it transition to secular employment? Is it stay in ministry? And so we began to pray through that. And God just kind of kept coming back, both through friends that knew me well, seeking their counsel, praying, knowing you have another assignment. And we didn't know what that was. So started, again, contacted Dallas Seminary, started finding a couple other networks I had to see what ministries were out there. And several popped up, and one of them was Maybank, Texas. That's right. And it was the first on my list when I listed hopes. No, I'm just kidding. But Pinnacle Church, and read a little bit about it. That was probably back in June, and I'll let them tell the story on the other end of that at some point. But sent in my resume and didn't hear anything for a while for a good reason. And that was during the time which Brad was here. And so as I ended up talking to the elders and we just began conversing, I was talking to another church, and you know, you don't want to compare, but you kind of say, what's the feeling of both churches? And they both have, I think, some similar needs. We're at a good place, but we want to be at a better place of ministry. And just as I interacted with the search team, which is basically some of the elders, just felt like they're saying what I want to hear. And I don't think they're just saying it, because if you know a few of these guys, how should I put it? They don't hold back. They say what they believe and know and want to, you know, feel like you need to hear. So it was a very open conversation, I think. And so just through that, God led us here, and we're excited about it. It's a challenge to now get moved, as you guys well know, but I think that God's got some great future.
Well, we agree too. One of the gaps I'd like to hear you speak a little bit about is in Washington, with your growth and stuff, what were some of the effective things that you did up there in your mind, aside from planting a second church, that really impacted the spiritual growth, spiritual life of that church that obviously grew for a reason?
Well, I don't want to take credit because I think God just brought a team together. And I even look at the staff team that I had, and two of them are now out, senior pastors, successful at other churches. Three of the other guys are still at the church and, you know, doing well there. So we had a great team, and that helps a lot. But I think in that area, a couple of things that really helped, I think, see growth. One of them is we taught the Bible. And in that area of the universe, there's not a lot of that going on. And so a lot of people, both believers and non-believers, even the non-believers were coming saying, yeah, we want to hear what Christianity really is about from the Bible, not just what somebody else is saying. So I think that the Bible teaching really had a big draw in the area. And the second thing that they had already started before I got there is they were really active in the community and ministering in the community. And so when I came in, it was just my opportunity to fuel that flame a little bit. And a couple of ways in which we did that, we had a yearly, we call it Serve Fest, where we just served the community. It ended up bringing in 12 other churches to do that. And it became so important, the parks guy, because we would do work in the parks around the city of Snohomish, and he stood up before the city council and said two things. One is, we don't have enough money to do what we do. The only reason we can keep it at the level it's at is because of Snohomish Community Church. And he says this in a board meeting. Well, the next week, the mayor shows up at church. You know, he wants to know what's going on. So that reputation became very much that this church loves its community. And that became a big draw for a lot of folks that may have never come to church for any other reason other than they sensed that. And so I'd say the other two things we did well there were men's and women's ministries were thriving. And the women's ministry was already going well when I got there. I don't know why that is, but women seem to do well.
Of course. Of course.
Patty's like, of course, they do. But the men's ministry was floundering, so we brought in a vibrant men's ministry and ended up seeing that grow in really strong ways. So I would say those three things, the Bible teaching, the community outreach, and the men's and women's ministries really were catalytic for our growth.
Okay, obviously, you want to get up here quickly. We want to get you up here quickly. Can you update us on where things stand with your housing there and what little you share about your thoughts about up here?
Yeah, keep in prayer. We basically decided we would take the house off the market, selling, because it had been on for 2 months. We're moving in November and December, and that we put up for lease, see if we could find somebody be interested in leasing. Now the good news about that is that the day after she did that, she gets a call from a realtor. It says, "I see you took this house off the market." And she said, "Well, yeah," but she explained the situation. She goes, "Well, good." She goes, "I've got a couple flying in from California this week, and they're looking at 6 homes, and yours was on top of the list." And Allie said, "Keep it on top of the list." And so they're coming Tuesday, and so you can pray specifically Tuesday that these folks will make an offer on the house. In the meantime, we are looking at what the different options are. If there's a way we could lease our house there, lease a house here, and offset the cost, that's one thing we're looking at. We are in discussion here locally with a number of people who have offered and said there might be some potential, everything from home builders to just other people in the community that said, there may be some short-term options or even longer-term options for lease opportunities. So just keep that in your prayers, and we'll go week by week and see what happens.
Okay, this is the point where Danny was going to call the elders up and we're going to lay hands on and just pray for Wayne and Allie and also that we get them up here. So Charlie and Graham and Edwin and Bob and Chuck will come over towards you. We'll kind of, you can
we'll
sit
walk
there.
over towards
We'll
Chuck.
go towards you, okay, so you don't have to get up. And then I'll just pray quickly.
Really, my man. I mean, Ed.
Lord, just thank you so much for bringing Wayne and Allie to Pinnacle Church, and we just firmly believe that he is the one that you have called to minister, lead us in our spiritual growth for many years to come. And we just ask you to intervene in the housing situation. We ask you to guide him as he teaches us from your word and help us to have your vision for Pinnacle Church as we
Yes.
forge the road in the coming years. And we're just so grateful for their heart, clearly, as we've learned about his family, that you would bless them, that you would keep us daily in prayer for them and all the leaders of the church and all the members here. And we just are grateful for us finishing 2023 well and launch us into 24 with great vision from you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Okay, so you're going to take the next section, right?
Yeah, I got you.
I want to hit the camera.
So Danny was supposed to do some updates, just church-wide, and so I'll take a couple of those, and the primary one is kind of where we're at with the leadership and elders. And let me say an aside too, I think you all would express this, but I have such appreciation for what Brad did in his time here, and I think it seems like he did a great job of loving and caring on people, but also setting a lot of things up, and so he and I have conversed, and it's good to have his contact that I can get a hold of. But and now I can talk to him. I said, man, I know he was torn on somehow because he loved being here, but also knew that. But I said, God placed you there for a reason, for a specific season, and you fulfilled it. And I think you'd all agree with that. So appreciate that. I know during that transition, there were a number of things that we're working through just on general transitions, even from back in the previous pastor, and kind of a tumultuous year in some ways. But at the end of that, part of what began to be talked about is just what does the leadership structure look like, and I wasn't here for these discussions, so if you have any detailed questions, I'll point to one of these other folks that are there. But as far as the elders, here's the way I would recommend you think about it, and it goes along at this point with our Constitution, and that is it talks about having elders, and within that elder body, it talks about at-large and council members. And so what it basically means, there's a council that's kind of running the day-to-day, what decisions have to be made on the immediate short end to make sure things are functioning, who does the staff report to, that becomes the session. But the larger group is they're still elders. And a call of an elder is to share and love and care for the flock. And so the broader group of elders still do that. When important decisions need to be made, we'll bring in the other elders and say, hey, let's all pray about this and talk about it. Now, I say all that just to kind of say where we're at right now, but also with this caveat, and that is I'm coming in, and as I've talked to the elders, I don't even know if all of our elders have the same idea of what an elder should be and what they should do in terms and all those other things. They may be totally in alignment and all agree, and I'm the only one that's coming in not sure yet. So one thing we're going to do is work with all the elders and going through a process of saying, okay, let's refresh in our minds what biblical eldership is. And then from that, we'll also begin to say, okay, how do we begin to develop and raise up new elders? And what does the process look like for that? So all of that's coming probably in January. That we'll start walking through some of that. And so like I've had very little opportunity to interact with some of the guys just because I haven't been here that much. And in fact, Graham and I kept trying to call him this week and find out I had the wrong number. So I thought he was ignoring me. Because you got the wrong number, man. So, we're going to get together, and I'm looking forward to catching up with all those men. So as it currently sets, those that are on the council that are kind of doing the day-to-day operations of that, and I don't have this written down because Danny was supposed to, so if I get this wrong, Mike and Charlie and Bob and me. Yeah. Is that right? And so that's kind of that directional team
and Danny.
At this point, and Danny, obviously. So he's not here, so I forget about it. Which, by the way, he's been texting me all morning. I'm going to try to make it. I'm going to try to make it. Like, dude, relax. Your family needs you, and so he'll catch up with us. But that's the immediate the at-large elders are help me with all the names.
Edwin.
So Edwin back there in the back. We got Graham and Chuck. So pray as we go through this process and as I get acclimated and that we're all unified. And I will tell you that there's nothing more important to me than a unified elder team. And I've told every church I've been at that I will charge the gates of hell with a bucket of water if I know the elders are there with me. If they're not, I might as well just give up. So building trust and unity in the elders is very important to me, so I look forward to getting to know the guys and seeing that moving forward. And I think that's all I need to cover on elders. If at the end we're going to have a question and answer time, so if you have any questions, hold them, because they may get answered before then, but then we'll have a little question and answer time. And it's gotten a little bit quieter. We've also got time, I got to watch the Cowboys kickoff to make sure we're out of here. So, I want to cover a little bit on, lack of a better term, mission, vision, and values for the church. And then we'll have, we'll talk a little bit about opportunities to serve and then question and answer time and we'll close out. So, these terms are things people throw away around all the time. Vision, mission, strategy, all those things. And there's still a lot of that what I want to